Thank you, Andy.
I'll pass over to Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And yeah, we're privileged this evening to have Bernie and Harry in from Jeti Radio Systems, and they're going to take us through history of the system, and obviously talking about the radio gear, the whys and wherefores of that, and plenty of Q&As later. So I'm going to pass over to the guys now, and yeah, Harry, Bernie, it's in your street now. We'll leave you to it.
That's it. Slight hiccup at this end, and I haven't got enough screens. So at the minute, I'm assuming we're on screen one, slide one.
We will be in a moment. Yeah.
That's it. Let me know when that's there, and then we can work our way through. I can't even see myself because I've got a screen full of Jeti model stuff at the minute.
There we go.
The presentation's up and running.
Okay, so you can see on the screen now, hopefully, a presentation for in here tonight of the BMFA. Myself, Bernie Jones of Jeti UK, and Harry Curzon, who you will all know is our Jeti Video Guru. He will be helping me during the presentation and at the end explaining a bit about programming. So if we can have slide 2, please. Which of course I can't see, so let me know.
It's there now, Harry. Bernie, sorry.
Okay, so there's the agenda for you. A little bit about the history of Jeti model itself, a bit about Jeti UK, how we formed. We'll talk a bit about the different radio systems and a bit about the receivers, a bit about central boxes. And then I'll pass over to Harry for programming and a bit of about the LUA Apps. It's going to be fairly brief on most things because it's quite difficult to get it into sort of 40 minutes an hour. So if we can have slide 3, please.
There you go.
Okay, so Jeti Model Company was originally formed in 1993 by Mr. Jelen and Mr. Tinker. This is where the name Jeti came from. It's the first 2 letters of each of the gentlemen that formed the company. And Mr. Yellen is one of the co-founders. He's still working with the company, just had his 60th birthday a year ago. And you can see they made him a nice cake out of a DC-16. He's still very involved in running the company, and he's at work 6-7 days a week. The first items that Jeti produced were speed controllers, and they're still a big part of their production. And then produced some 35 meg receivers, really small receivers, but very popular with the glider guys. And then in December 2006, while producing all these bits and pieces, they moved into their new factory and offices building in Pribor in the Czech Republic, which is what you can see in the picture there, nice big yellow building. It's actually bigger than that now. It's been added to over the years. It's gone up and out. All the systems that Jeti produce are actually made in-house in this building. And all the marketing, developing, the assembly, warranties, shipping, and also within the building is Mr. Yellen's fantastic radio and model collection. We've got model motors, all different sort of makes of radios there. In August 2008, Jeti were sort of the forerunners in producing the 2.4 gigahertz modules, and they made modules for other people's radios. And these were produced along with a range of receivers to work with these modules. And that's when I first got involved with Jeti. I actually was using one of the modules in my multiplex radio. We could have the next slide, please. And here we can see some of the production and assembly taking place. On many of my visits over to the Czech Republic, it's always surprised me how busy and how happy all the employees are. The company has some 50 plus employees, and they work pretty hard. I mean, 7 days a week. Normal sort of Czech company. They all work very hard for what they do. They start early, they finish early, but they work 7 days a week. And they actually keep us supplied, in my opinion, with one of the best systems available in the world. which is probably a good time to also mention the best lager in the world. It's the same sort of feeling. It's a very personal thing, but it's what you like. And the next slide, please.
Hopefully.
So we should be on Jeti UK now?
Yes. Yep.
Well, we're working well. Seeing as I'm working blind, we're not doing bad. So Esau and Gadgets, which is my company, was started back in 2005. We originally were helping to develop and push the new height limit glider competitions and working with Aromatech and RC Electronics in developing these systems to control launch heights and motor runs in gliders. Sometime in 2010, if I remember rightly, Esau and Gadgets started working with Puffin Models, who were a big importer of Jeti gear. And we started stocking Jeti Models items for our online store. I actually bought my first DC-16 in December 2012. And to be honest, I've never looked back. And to pun the phrase, I was so impressed with the equipment and the way it all worked that I bought the company. Well, the UK side of it anyway. But during the summer of 2014, Puffin Models asked me if I would actually like to take over their Jeti model account and business, which was finally agreed, and the deed was done at the BMFA Nationals when I actually worked on the Puffin Model stand. And John had to admit to me that it was actually the best year that they've ever done at the Nationals, and they sold more Jeti gear because I was talking to people about it and my enthusiasm was showing. So the Jeti model sales in the UK just seemed to grow, and we must have been doing something right along with the other Jeti importers in the UK. One thing I like about Jeti model equipment is it's not something that you actually have to sell. It does that itself. People just want to buy it. The main thing I had to supply is a bit of knowledge and the service. So following on a bit there, in 2016, I was asked by Jeti Models if I would like to be the sole importer distributor for the UK and supply the other UK dealers. Well, this was agreed with Jeti, and with quite a large outlay for stock, we're still here and supplying dealers and customers in the UK and enjoying it. And we enjoy what we do, and I get to use all the equipment, which is even better. And hopefully the tax man allows me to do it as demonstration rather than actually having to pay for it all the time. So next slide, please.
There we go.
So here we can see the full current range of the radios. One of the biggest headaches for myself as an importer and the dealers all around the company, I would think, is all the colors you can see there. And trust me, that's just a few of them, as well as 3 or 4 different sizes of radios. There's also loads of different colors. And I must admit, if I had my way, I would go with Mr. Henry Ford's idea, one color, make them all black. Next slide, please.
There we go.
So in this slide, although the DC radios you can see here are all the latest versions, the first DC radios were released in August 2016, along with Jeti's normal, I always laugh about it, Jeti always say they're going to produce something new, and I always ask them what year, because it never always quite happens when they say it will. But these radios came out in August 2016, the DC-16, which was very popular at the time and closely followed by a DC-14. The DC-14, the Mark II you can see on the left, actually looks the same as the other radio. It just came with slightly less capability, had the same milled aluminium case, was the same weight and everything else. But the sticks were slightly different. They're actually made from a plastic rather than the aluminium, but they were all still ball raced and Hall controlled. So exactly the same system, just slightly cheaper to produce, which made it slightly cheaper for people to buy. And you were able to add to this system to bring it up to the same sort of standard or close to the standard of the standard DC-16s. The DC-24, what we classify as our flagship radio, was introduced in July 2016. So we're all talking about fairly young radios here. We're not talking about radios that are been about for a long time. But during the course of the time, even from 2016, the radios were produced in a way that made them upgradable. So whenever any pilots or anybody came up with another idea or the way they would like the radio to work, they were asked or they put the request through to Jeti Technical, and an upgrade was produced. So these radios are being upgraded all the time to do more and more things, and the capabilities are there. The DC-24, compared to the DC-16, basically had slightly bigger memory and chipset capabilities with a color screen, and had the availability of the 900 megahertz backup, one of the first radios to produce this backup system. But personally, never actually having used it in anger, but I have tested it. I've flown around for ages on it, but never had it come in anger. In the UK, it's quite interesting to note, in the UK, the 900 megahertz system is set up at 863 to 870 megahertz. And this is a different band that's used in the USA and Australia. So just be careful there if you're exporting, importing any gear. The UK 900 system will not work outside of Europe. The next slide, please.
There you go.
Okay, this the DC-16, the DS-16 radios brought out for the thumb flyers, the handheld radio boys. They were first introduced in June 2013, increasing the range and the stock holding for the dealers, of course, another headache for the dealers, thank you, Jeti, but offering a radio suitable for thumb flies. These were again brought out with a few extra features in the DC, the main one being the accelerometer. Therefore, you could actually roll the radio around a bit to control different inputs, voice messages, and get information down from the aircraft. There was also, a little bit after that, an entry-level radio by introducing a DS-14. Again, similar to the DC-14, this was slightly less capable as it came out of the box, but was very upgradable with firmware upgrades available to do whatever you needed to do with it. The flagship radio, classified as the DS-14, was introduced in September 2017, adding all the features that the DC-24 had. But the DS-24, the DS-24 had additional controls on the rear, very usable for on-ground controls. If you're a thumb flyer, your hands naturally fall to them. So all the Jeti radios were actually produced with the main case being milled from a solid ingot of aluminium, making the radio feel nice and solid. Sat well in the hand, although many users started using the DC brackets on the DS radio as well, and harness to help take the weight. Both radios sit very nicely in the shoulder harness and allow you to use the radio, throw your gliders off the side of the hill without the radio disappearing under your arm and putting full right rudder in or full right aileron in. So this became very popular. But in answer to a lot of requests, in 2019, Jeti released a new radio for entry level, the DS-12. The main difference this radio was being that it was built in a hard plastic case, not the aluminium milled case. It did come out with the plastic gimbals, the same gimbals that were available on the 14 ranges. And it came out as an 8-channel system, very much upgradable. As an 8-channel system, it could pretty much fly any basic model. Main differences were not in the aluminium case, and it only had one 2.4 gigahertz module, where all other Jeti radios actually carried 2 modules in the transmitter, giving you dual diversity in the transmitter. Available as an 8-channel radio, it had the ability to run enough systems for the average model, but there were also firmware upgrades that could build the radio up, more channels, more features, and it would also had the ability to add a 900 megahertz NG, new generation, they called it, system if required. So although as an entry-level radio, nice and reasonably priced to start, it actually could be built up over time with firmware upgrades and make quite a radio out of it. Next slide, please.
There we are.
So on this slide, we can see that, again, a range of radios and even more colors that are available. I hope you're listening, Mr. Yellen. Too many colors. Also at the rear of the DS24, we can see the extra switches. They do fall nicely if you're a thumb flyer to your fingers for control. Personally, I tend to use them only on ground-based controls that I need to make. I don't like trying to think about where the switches are at the back of the radio. Maybe that's because I spend more time flying with the DC than the DS, but yeah, it's a good system. There's a lot of popular out there. On the right of the screen, you should be able to see a black carbon DS12 and a yellow DS12. The yellow one shown there, which is also available in red, the blue and black, is the standard radio, comes with the standard plastic sticks, basically very capable radio. And then Jeti brought out a special carbon edition. It's not just a carbon front, it has metal gimbals, it has metal switches, metal controls on the front, the wheels are metal. Basically, it's an upgraded 12. Same system inside, same upgradable features and everything else. Next slide, please.
There we go.
So here we have a range of receivers. These are the R receivers. These came basically from the original receivers right the way back in the beginning. And these are still quite popular receivers. The RSAT2 in the middle, an uprated RSAT from the original ones, but very popular for use with central boxes and things. The R9, a very popular glider receiver. And then we've got the R14 and R18, big chunky receivers for use in big models if you don't want to go down the road of the central box system that we'll talk about a bit later. The R5L, these of course are all European UK receivers. These are not the same as receivers supplied elsewhere. They are the UK ones. Next slide, please.
There we go.
So here we have the latest range of receivers. These are the Rex receivers. Slightly more power available for updating, a bit more memory available, slightly faster chips. Work exactly the same with the radios as a receiver brought out right the way back in 2008. They still will work with the radios. These are the newest version, fastest version. These have more capabilities. But one of the main questions I get asked with these, because the fact that a Rec 6 or a Rec 7 itself is pretty straightforward, it means you've got 6 things to plug in. I get asked about what the A20 and the A40 mean. It is no more difficult or simple than the fact that A20 is a 200 millimeter aerial and the A40 is a 400 millimeter aerial. Most of the receivers actually come with 200 millimeter aerials. The Rex 3 itself starts as a Rex 3 100mm aerial, and then is also available with 200 and 400mm aerials, and which is why you can buy a Rex 3 as an A20 or a Rex 3 A40. Just means the aerials are longer. It also that also applies to the Rex 7, which comes as standard with a 200mm aerial, and there's a Rex 7 A40 with a 400mm aerial. So it's funny, it's a question I get asked regularly. One of those questions that are obvious to me, but if you don't know, you don't know, and no question is stupid. So always ask. If you're not sure, always ask. It's a good system. Don't be frightened of it. The Rex 12 itself is supplied as standard with 400mm aerials. And of the Rex range, it's the only one where the power is supplied through an MPX socket. It gives you the ability to run different switches, different batteries into it, nice and powerful. Personally, I reckon if you're using anything more than a Rex 12, then possibly you should be looking at a central box system. And that way you can distribute the power and the receivers and backup receivers through a nice, easy system. One worthwhile point, that there's sort of 5 receivers shown on there, a 3, a 6, a 7, a 10, and a 12. But all those receivers are capable of putting out 24 channels through the X-Bus system, both in main receiver mode and in backup mode. So they can actually be connected to each other to back up each other or whatever. Any information on this sort of setup, Harry's videos are the place to go. The next slide, please.
There we are.
Okay, so here we have, at first glance, another set of Rex receivers, a 6, a 7, a 10, and a 12. These are actually assist receivers. They have all the same capabilities of the Rex receivers of the same name, but there's a built-in gyro system. It's a built-in 3-axis stabilization system, and it works with fixed wing or rotary aircraft, multi-rotor aircraft. They are not suitable for helicopters. They're not designed for helicopters, but they work very well with fixed wing and very well with multi-rotor. Again, for more information on programming and setting up these, it's not something I can get into a 40-45 minute chat. So Harry's videos are the place to go, without a doubt. Next slide, please.
There we are.
Okay, so here we have 2 900 megahertz receivers. These are similar looking all around the world, bearing in mind in this country they don't transmit the same as other countries, or don't receive on the same as other countries. The one on the left hand side is the RSAT 900, and the one on the right is an RSAT 900 new generation. The easiest way to look at them, if you've got them in your box, if you've got them sort of tucked away, is that the aerials are different on the end. For the DS24, the DC24 system, you need to use the one on the right. Again, it's a question we come up with regularly. I can't get it to bind. My first question is always, what radio are you using? Which receiver have you got? And inevitably, they've been sold the wrong receiver. The one on the right with the right angle aerials is for the DS and the DC24s. The one on the left, the one on the right with the aerials following the lead is the new NG. It's got it written on it. And these are for the new Mark II radios and the DS12s, the DC12, the DS12, the DC14s, 16s, and Mark IIs, and the DS14s and 16 Mark IIs. These are the new NGs, and it's something we do come across quite often. So just when you're buying these things, make sure you're buying the right one for your radio. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay, here we have a set of central boxes. Excuse me while I wet the whistle. Central box 100, one of the original central boxes, eight outputs, good way of distributing power to the servos if you need to. 210 and 220 central boxes in the middle, got 15 outputs, 2 battery inputs, and the one on the right, the red 220, actually has a fused system to help protect servos and not discharge all the batteries if you get a servo jam up. The one on the left there, no servos at all if you want a straightforward system. A bit lower down, we've got a 310 and a 320, same sort of idea as the 210, 220. 18 outputs, the 310 no fuses, the 320 8 heavy duty fuses, and the rest normal servo fuses. And on the very far right, the central box 400, 24 outlets. All the central boxes are capable of having 2 receivers plugged into them and 1 backup receiver, so you can actually get 3 receivers in there to give you backup. There's provision for sensors and everything else in there as well. The 3 series and the 400 series also have BECs in the system, so you could bit of voltage control. Again, more information available on the website or through the videos. So next slide, please.
Okay.
So here we have Harry. A lot of you like to see who he is. A lot of you praise this fella. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Harry now and let him talk to you for a while about programming the models, LUA apps, and the systems, and hopefully mention his video a few times, although I don't think we need to mention him too much because pretty much everyone out there, looking at his subscribers on this screenshot, which was 2 million and something, I think. God knows.
2,000.
2,000. All right then. All right. So Harry, over to you. I'll be quiet now for a bit.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah,
Good, clear.
good. I apologize. I'm having problems with audio hearing things tonight, which is why I keep disappearing to reboot, but it's working at the moment. Okay. Well, I'm just going to take a very general overview and impressions of the Jeti software in LUA, because we can deal with any specifics in the Q&A later. So this is going to be a bit more biased for those people who perhaps don't have a Jeti, who are watching tonight and they're wondering about getting it. Okay, but Jeti programming is not difficult. Indeed, the more complex your model is, the easier it becomes in comparison to the more traditional brands like JR and Futaba. It's not difficult to learn, but it is just a little bit different. I came to Jeti from a Multiplex 4000, and in comparison, I would say the Jeti software is somewhere in between Multiplex and the traditional Japanese brands. It does some things the way that Multiplex does, and some things the way the Japanese radios do them. What Jeti gives you is a lot of freedom to create things from scratch, and that is what needs a different mindset to the traditional radios. Instead of the transmitter having pre-made definitions of models and not letting you do much else that's not already built in, Jeti lets you define the transmitter and define the model. It has some pre-made templates to get you going quickly on the vast majority of models. But if you have something that's not covered by those templates, then you can add, change, remove, whatever you want in the way that the transmitter is configured and in the way the model is built. So if you have some bizarre model with 5 ailerons and 3 flaps, and 2 of the ailerons are triple ganged servos, but the other 3 are single servos, and you want to operate some by stick and some by rotary knob and some by a switch, Jeti can handle that without breaking sweat. It makes it easy to program complex gliders with 10 servos in the wings, with complex mixings, interactions, and trims. And it can also be programmed to do some amazing things if you have the ingenuity to make use of the features within it. An example that comes up regularly of how Jeti is different from the traditional radios happens when people who have come from the older Futaba or JR sets want to program nose wheel steering. They want to mix rudder to some auxiliary function. In Jeti, You do not mix, although you can if you want to. You create a steering function, you tell it which stick to use, tell it which servo channel to use, and then that steering function gets its own trims, its rates, its expo, and so on. It has absolutely nothing to do with the rudder apart from sharing the same stick. And just worth a mention for those of you who haven't tried it or don't know Jeti that well, is the auto trim feature. And that's a great feature that you switch on and off as required. It makes the trims move to where you are holding the sticks. Now that means you can trim a model without taking your fingers off the sticks, which is great for maiden flights, especially if a model is way out of trim and you don't want to take your fingers off the sticks at all. Also, there are many ways to program the elevator adjustment required when the flaps are down. But my favorite way means that instead of mixing flap to elevator, we just use the elevator trims. So combine that with the auto trim feature. And it means you can trim out any ballooning or diving caused by the flaps simply by continuing to fly the model. You don't take your fingers off the sticks and you let Jeti software sort out the trims. Now the transmitter software is common across the entire Jeti range. So if you learn to program on a 12, then you can program a 14, a 16, or a 24. The only differences are whether a particular transmitter has a software feature or not, and the number of those features, such as how many mixers it has, and the physical switches. For example, the DC have more switches than the DS, and the DS24 has switches and sliders on the backplate. So a model memory from a 24 can be loaded onto a 12, and it will work provided it doesn't use any features or physical switches that the 12 does not have, but then you just go into the 12 and modify it as required. And that's a huge help for learning the radio because it means that anyone with any Jeti radio can help you regardless of which particular transmitters you have. Another thing is that integration with Jeti is built into many devices from third-party manufacturers, such as Bavarian Demon and Digitech Aerosports, which allows their devices to be programmed directly from the transmitter screen, and therefore you don't need a separate programming device and screen to access them. The integration with Zikoi's gas turbine ECUs is such that the Jeti transmitter can fully replace the ground data terminal, and you can change ECU settings from the transmitter. Now, to help you get going or cope with something you haven't tried before or some of the more complex things, there are many videos on YouTube. Not just mine, but I do have a channel with a lot of videos ranging from helping newcomers find their way around to how to program everyday items like the flaps to solutions to some very complex user requests. You can find my channel on YouTube by searching just on my name, Harry Curzon. The best starting point is to click on the playlists in the top menu, which is what you can see on the screen here. Many, not all of my videos, are organized into playlists of various topics, as you can see on that screen. And it's a good way to find it if you're hunting for something. Next slide, please.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, telemetry. One of the things Jeti is renowned for is its telemetry. Now, I thought telemetry was a gimmick until I started using it, and now I regard it as essential. Telemetry data can be displayed on the transmitter screen, given by speech readouts, either on demand or at regular intervals, by preset alarms, and by telemetry actually having control of things, for example, putting the retract gear down if the air pressure gets low. I'm a firm believer in never taking your eyes off the model, never look down at the transmitter screen. So I get speech readouts on demand of anything I want to know, and I have alarms set to speak to me if certain values fall below or above a critical level. Now, it can be as simple as just a milliamp counter telling me it's time to land because I have used a preset amount from the battery, instead of a flight time, which is a crude device with an electric model. The telemetry data is recorded in the transmitter, and it can be shown as graphs on the transmitter screen after the flight. The slide you see on screen now shows a short 30-second electric motor run. By the way, we get these superb photos of the transmitter screen because one of Jeti's features is that you can assign a switch to take screenshots, which are then recorded on the memory card. This view that you're seeing now shows 3 telemetry parameters overlaid. The primary one in green is the battery voltage. The red line is RPM and the blue line is amps. You can toggle around all 3, taking turn at being the primary, so that the scale on the left changes as required to show the RPM numbers or amp numbers. And you can do this at the airfield immediately after a flight and see what was going on with your model. Next slide, please. Thank you. So back at home, that recorded data can be downloaded onto a computer and replayed in real time in a piece of software called Jeti Studio. This slide shows the full set of data from that last slide, and you can press the play button up at the top right of Studio for it to step through the data in real time, showing the changing numerical values in the boxes at the bottom right. So for instance, I can replay electric motor and battery data in real time. Signal data quality and the individual receiver aerial signal strengths are also telemetried back to the transmitter and recorded for checking later if you need to, and they trigger voice alarms if they get too low. Next slide, please. LUA applications. LUA is a programming language, and anyone who knows it can write applications to put on the transmitter. Apps are created to do some task, either better than the built-in software can do it, or that the built-in software cannot do. Now, Jeti themselves have created quite a few for you, which are available on Jeti Studio, and many other apps written by Jeti users are available, and all these apps are for free for you to add onto your transmitter. Most of the apps are about beautiful display and presentation of the data on screen, but there are some fascinating other things they can do, and I'm going to take a look at a couple of them now. So next slide, please. Now, a chap in America, Dave McQueenie, has pushed LUA as far as having Google Maps on the transmitter screen with live tracking, no-fly zone warnings, and GPS triangle racing. This screen view shows a short glider flight where the track of the glider has been color-coded for some telemetry parameter, in this case, the signal data quality. It's mostly blue in that line, indicating 100%, but you can see 3 very short sections that have turned green, indicating a drop in percentage. As I mentioned earlier, my rule is never take your eyes off the model, and so these apps speak to you to tell you whatever you need to know about your position around the no-fly zones, or to steer you around a GPS triangle race. You don't need to look at the screen at all whilst flying. Next slide, please. Now, another couple of LUA apps give a good example of what can be done by adjusting multi-point mixer curves for you whilst you fly the model as normal. One, called Auto Crow, adjusts the points of an elevator trim offset as you open crow brakes. You simply fly the glider, slowly open the brakes, and use the elevator to keep the model's attitude pointing wherever you want. The app reads what you're doing with the elevator and sorts out all the trim curve for you. And then forevermore, you just open crow brake and the model stays absolutely online. The slide that's on screen now shows the result of a similar app called AutoMix, which was designed primarily for knife edge. The 2 graphs on the right show the result of using the app. The top one shows a rudder to elevator mix curve, and the bottom one shows rudder to aileron mix curve. You simply roll to knife edge and push on rudder, then move the elevator and aileron to hold the model steady. The app reads what you are doing and creates those mixer curves for you, all set up in 1 or 2 passes on each side. So that's all from me. It's just a tiny taster of the enormous ability of the Jeti system.
Harry, sorry, Harry. I was just listening there. Look, fantastic. we've got a series of questions for you and Bernie here. Barry, did you want to take through some of the questions you answered and said you would come back with?
Yeah, sure.
First off.
Yeah. So we had a guy called Rude. He asked, will there be a version 2 of the DC24? So we saw that you had version 2s of the 12 and the 16, I think. Will there be one for the 24 version 2?
It's a question I've asked Jeti, and there basically is a no. We're not planning on anything.
Okay, that's good.
The DS24 does everything it needs to do.
Yeah.
And basically the 16s and the 14s have been brought up to that standard. So at the moment, no.
Okay, that's good.
Tomorrow.
Jonathan Smith asked, will there ever be a DC stroke DS 32?
Why?
Yeah, well, I think you better explain it. I think I can just about understand it, Bernie, but could you just explain why?
On channel wise, is that what we're talking about?
I think so, yes.
Channel wise, 24 channels will do almost anything and everything that is needed, because you can mix so many of the controls within those channels. At the moment, I don't believe that there is any idea of producing anything bigger.
Okay.
Who knows in the future?
Yeah.
I suspect it's a case of just the tiny numbers that would be involved. Some people will need more than 24 channels, up to 32, but I suspect it's such a small number that many manufacturers would just consider it not worth the effort.
Yeah. I would have thought if you need something with 32 channels, what you actually need is an engineer with another transmitter next to you.
Yeah.
In that way, you could actually have 48 with Jeti, but you'd have an engineer controlling the motors or whatever.
Engineer kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now this one, Bernie, is going to really stump you. Gary Nunn asked, the radio, very nice. He goes flying a lot in the winter up on the slopes. Transmitter feels very cold. Did they ever think about an internal heater?
There has been a few aftermarket type heaters, one of which actually goes on the inside of the DC, that do warm up the cases. But if it's that cold, perhaps you shouldn't be flying.
Yeah.
You should be at the pub having a pint. But yeah, I mean, there's also heated mitts and things like that. There are people that have actually put wraps on the radio so that you're not holding the aluminium.
Yeah, that's a
Might just come in with one.
Again, nothing that is definitely in a pipeline on the way, but it's something that the more people that ask Jeti CZ, the more likely something's to happen.
I do share this problem with the transmitter being feeling very cold in winter, because it's aluminium, so it conducts the heat out of your hand very quickly. What I did in my early days with the 16 was from eBay. I got a sheet, about A4 size sheet of Alcantara substitute leather, and cut that up and basically copy-dexed it, which is contact glue, to the sides of the transmitter, which certainly took away the cold feel. But maybe perhaps because of my maturity now, yes, I tend to go out flying less on those freezing cold days. But yeah, it'd be nice if Jeti fixed that. But it's at the moment, it's not too difficult to glue a little wrap like a cheap Alcantara.
As you can see from my background, I live in the cold north. I don't find I don't find it a problem.
Mark, you were going to say something?
It was a question from Peter Jenkins, one of our top aerobatic flyers. He wanted to know whether it was legal to use the UK Jeti system in countries which have the other 900 megahertz frequencies.
Whether it's legal?
Yes.
Yeah, the 900 frequency is an emergency frequency. It's legal for any emergency use. Therefore, within the radios, it's perfectly legal. It would be illegal to fly on 900 without 2.4 being enabled within the radio.
Yeah.
But as a backup emergency frequency to recover any aircraft that could cause a problem, or any model that could cause a problem, perfectly legal.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. We've got a heap more questions here, Bernie. Louis asked, is there a wireless firmware update for the receiver on the horizon? I think the Powerbox might do it wirelessly.
I'm not talking to you now.
No.
Again, it's something that's being looked at. It's something that's been possible. There is an ability to download to a phone with a cable now, model memories and bits and pieces. So yes, it's something that is quite possibly in the pipeline. The engineers at Jeti Model are always looking at ways of improving. Again, the more requests that are sent to Jeti, the more likely it is that something will be applied. They are very open to listening to requests.
I think the next question, which came from Wim, is probably in a similar breath. Will there be a Bluetooth option for speech rather than hardwired earplugs?
There is a Bluetooth option available, but I've never used it as such. But I do use a Bluetooth a Bluetooth module plugged into the microphone port that talks to my earphones.
Yeah, I can see how that works.
The aftermarket is there; it's available.
Yeah, so that just plugs in.
Plugs into the earphone socket. Yeah.
Okay, that's
while we're on quite general questions, Alan Falconbridge asked, "What is the best way of charging Jeti batteries?"
In the transmitter, or power line?
He's not being specific, but I'm getting transmitter.
Best way to charge them is with the dedicated chargers. Plug them in. You can leave them plugged in. They will tell you when they're fully charged. There's also 12-volt chargers available for car use.
Sorry, he's just corrected it, and he's just come back and said receiver batteries.
Receiver batteries. The power irons can be charged in two ways. Majority of them don't want to be charged by more than 2 amps. One of the issues that a lot of people have is their chargers will not charge lithium ion or lithium polymer batteries without having a balance plug fitted. Most of the better quality chargers will do lithium ion batteries without balance, up to 3 or 4 cells. So the 2-cell ones are fine. You can actually charge, if your charger is capable of doing it, you can charge the Jeti batteries on a lithium polymer charge rate, and you will get a little bit more capacity. But personally, I always charge on lithium ion and never use more than about 70% capacity anyway.
Okay. A few more questions still, Bernie. This is a bit of a out wide question from Greg. How long do the transmitter cases take to mill? Have you got any idea how long that machining operation takes?
No is the answer, but I can find out.
That's a good enough answer. I've seen a picture of the machine. It's a considerable.
There is a video doing it, but it does skip through quite quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Anthony asked, will there be a touch screen?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. And the last one of the questions that I sort of
probably get shot for that and all.
Do the servos have to be disconnected during a firmware update?
The reason the recommendation is to disconnect everything from the receiver for a firmware update is when you plug it in, you are putting power into the receiver. Therefore, what's going to happen is your receiver will go to failsafe, which could cause a problem. So the best thing is to disconnect everything. The recommended thing is to disconnect everything for updates.
Okay.
I personally have got a couple of gliders where the receiver is well buried down in the depths, and I've got an extension lead plugged in. It's actually got a blue bit of tape on it, so I know what it is, and I do update it, but I disconnect the motor and everything, and I do update it. It updates fine, but it's not the recommended way.
No. So the recommended way is everything.
Recommended way is to unplug.
Yeah.
Barry,
Because
if
you're
I may,
powering the receiver.
Yeah, Mark.
Barry, if I may, I'm going to have to bow out because I've got an emergency meeting that's cropped up that's going to come in. But could you just make sure, let everybody know Father Luke Goymore is going to be doing a presentation next week.
I'll do that.
If you could do that. And look, thank you guys. Sorry about this, rather embarrassing, but we've got another BMFA emergency just cropped up, so I'm going to have to deal with that. But I'll leave you in the capable hands of Andy and Barry.
Yep. See you later, Mark.
Right,
Yeah, Mark.
Okay, Bernie, we've still got a bunch of questions. I don't think we've ever had so many questions on an ITAT.
You want to be on my telephone?
Okay. Jeff Warsham asked, do the Rex series receivers process the 2.4 gigahertz signals differently than the older R series? In my case, the antenna and Q-log data seem cleaner in the graphs. Is that real, or is it a result of data massaging by the Rex processors?
The Rex receivers have different components on the boards, faster components, more memory components. So the possibility is it possibly does process things slightly differently.
Okay.
It is like all electronic things evolve. And the Rex receiver is a more modern built board than the R-type receivers. However, I've still got an old R8, Jeti R8 channel that I bought and was using with my original multiplex radio with a 2.4 module in, that won't update anymore. It still flies gliders around without any bother.
It's fine. Okay. Peter Farnell asked, if I have two 2.4 gigahertz receivers in a model in dual path mode, and one receiver is set as a backup via the X bus, does the telemetry also get transferred to the backup receiver, so we'll send into the TX if the primary receiver loses communication? Quite a complicated question.
So here we're talking about having a primary receiver in a model, maybe a Rex 10, with possibly being backed up by a Rex 3 using X bus.
Yeah.
Those 12 channels that are being transmitted from both receivers, if the main receiver goes down aerial-wise, the Rex 3 will transmit everything through, and all the telemetry from the other receiver will continue to be transmitted if the aerials are capable of transmitting it.
Okay.
It will run through that backup system.
Okay, I think that answered that question well. Okay, I'm preparing myself for you jumping at me now, Bernie. Stephen Everett, I use Futaba S-Bus. Can you use Futaba programmable servos with Jeti?
Which programmable servos?
Futaba, but I'm not very familiar with those Futaba programmable.
If you can set up the Futaba servo endpoints and stop points and center points to work as normal with a Futaba, there's no reason why that wouldn't work if you set the servo up exactly the same as a high-tech servo would set. You can set a high-tech servo up and your Jeti radio will use those endpoints that the servo is set to. So I don't know the exact answer, but I don't see why not.
Okay. Graham Gooch asked the question about DS.
I'm not talking to him.
No. I have a DS24. Can I switch the TX off to check that the failsafe is functioning correctly, then switch the TX back on without any adverse effects happening? I would have thought that was a normal way to check a failsafe.
It's not the normal way to check a failsafe on Jeti. You have a system where you can actually switch off. I mean, for instance, if you've got dual path on a radio system and a 900 backup, you can switch off one transmitter module, the second transmitter module, both modules, or you can switch it all off, which is the correct way to display your failsafe capability on the airfield or in your workshop if you want to check it. If you switch the radio off and something goes wrong, you then have to wait for the whole radio to boot up to get back control if you set something in there wrong. But if you use the Jeti system, you've got to press one button to get your control back, instant.
Yeah.
And I believe, Harry, we have a video on that, don't we?
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Let's see what Nigel Castle. I've often thought Expo should decrease with speed, i.e. high throttle. Can a mix be made from throttle to the Expo percentage? I think that's probably a Harry question, isn't it?
Yes, it can, but then of course throttle has nothing to do with speed. You can be at very high speed at low throttle and no speed at very high throttle. So if you want the Expo to go with speed, you would need really an airspeed telemetry sensor.
Yeah. Would that be possible, Harry?
Yes,
to get that telemetry feed back into the Expo percentage?
Totally, and I have videos showing how to use telemetry as controls to move things.
Okay. I think this might be the same question about touch screens. No, different guy. Is there a reason why they're not using a touch screen? I think this is back to Bernie.
Jeti model's feeling on it is that they prefer to use the control wheel.
Yeah.
More precise control. Can't actually get you can't touch the screen and make a change that you weren't expecting. You have to actually physically go in, press a button and make the change. So no, touch screen is not been on the agenda as far as I know.
Yeah.
I'm not Jeti model, I'm only Jeti UK, so I don't get to know it all.
No. Okay, they might have quite a good reason why they don't.
Simon Thornton's just put the main problem with touchscreens on a chat. So yeah.
Yeah, what did he say? Oh, reliability. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's clear enough. This question has come up twice now. Are the assist receivers okay with turbines? I can't see. So the assist is just the gyros. Yeah.
I mean, this is a question we get asked all the time. I've got customers and dealers in the UK fly their turbines with Jeti Assist without any problems. All gyro systems are susceptible to turbine frequencies that can be presented. Those frequencies can change from model to model with exactly the same turbine. It's not a big issue. It's an issue that Jeti are aware of and are looking at ways of reducing the problem. The majority of turbines will quite happily fly with the assist.
Okay.
Again, nothing is 100% on that because there has been issues. But you can put that same turbine in a different model and there won't be an issue.
Yeah.
Just the frequencies that run through the model.
Yeah, you mean resonant vibrations. Yeah. Okay. That's a good answer.
There is a system on the assist for taking it out.
Yeah.
You can't take it out of all points.
Okay, this next one's a bit sensitive, Bernie. You've compared against
I'm an ex-para, remember?
You've compared with Futaba and JR. What are your advantages, Jeti, over OpenTX?
My personal feeling is, although we can do all sorts of things with the Jeti and we can change things, we can use the apps, we can create different screens, what we can never do is actually change the way the system works. OpenTX you can.
Yeah.
Therefore, you've got the ability for someone who knows exactly what they're doing to press the wrong key and create havoc within the system. OpenTX works fine for 90% of the time, but it has to be very carefully controlled. Jeti want to hold on to control of their system, so they won't ever as such be having open systems on their radios.
No, that's quite understandable. Okay, let's pick out a few more. Ian Medley Rose, are there any plans to have more than 10 flight modes?
This is one of the problems with Ian. If he could have 50 flight modes, he would.
Okay.
Yes, you can have more than 10 flight modes. A bit like the old multiplex system, you would have to do it on more memories. So if you need more than 10 flight modes, it's because the weather is very much different. Therefore, perhaps you should copy a memory and change those flight modes in the next memory for that weather condition. So there is an ability to have as many flight modes as you've got models. But the system at the moment only allows for 10 on one model memory.
David Woods asked, you showed a 12-channel receiver with extra bits on the end of the antennas. Do these receivers have better sensitivity?
The choke on the end of the longer aerials is designed to help help with possible interference down the length of the aerial. Although the aerial is shielded, any wire is capable of doing it. So the choke on the end is just purely there to help damp out any interference. The shorter aerials and the longer aerials, it allows them to all work the same, basically. They're no better or worse, but it's the length of the wire that helps the difference. I'm no electrical engineer, but that's how I see it.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Kevin Ross asked, I think this is going to be a Harry question. Has Jeti Studio been updated to work with the latest iOS software? Is that iOS? Is that Apple?
That's basically it's Apple on the Apple Mac. It has been updated. There is a slight hiccup that comes in with some Apple Macs. Jeti are looking at it.
Okay.
So the latest version is not as stable on a Mac as we would like. Go back to the previous version, which will still do everything fine.
Yep. Okay. Louis again. Do you have to always update the receivers when updating transmitter to the latest software, or are receivers updated okay to still use? I think he's Italian, so it's a little bit tricky.
Yeah, ideally, if you update the transmitter, you should update the receivers.
Okay.
If you can't, as I said earlier, I'm using receivers that cannot be updated. I've got an old R8 that can't be updated. Still works fine with the radio. It will work. It will always work, but maybe it will work better with the update. So ideally, yes, always update.
Okay. James Yates asked, he wanted to know, is there a plain language manual that defines all the abbreviations and a basic schematic of how the software works? I find the provided manual difficult to understand. I think probably the thing there is to get into Harry's YouTube videos. Is that fair to say?
That would be my answer to that. The manual was basically a Czech manual, translated to German, translated to English, translated to Italian, translated to it's always not going to be quite right, but yeah, the videos explain things much better than the manual, without a doubt.
Okay. Mike asks, signal strength. Are the values shown on the screen the signal from the transmitter to the receiver, or the receiver to the transmitter? So signal strength in the loop.
In the loop. Basically, my understanding is that the signal is the receiver talking back to the transmitter. Which is why, if you actually lose telemetry and the aerials are right down low, you can still fly, because the transmission to the receiver is far greater than the transmission back telling the radio what the receiver's doing. So yes, I would say it is different. The transmitter is going to be more powerful controlling the receiver than the receiver is talking to the transmitter.
Do you see that, Bernie, where you lose telemetry some of the time?
I've flown big gliders way out of sight. And yes, sometimes when you turn, you might lose telemetry, you might lose the aerial as such, but you still fly the model.
I just say there are two sets of values come back regarding the signal. There's the A value, which is a number out of 9, and that is purely the signal strength at the receiver. So it's reporting back how loud it's hearing the signal. The Q value, which is a percentage, is the percent for the round trip. So if 100% of your data packets arrived at the receiver, and it always sends back an acknowledgement for each data packet, and if 100% of them arrived back at the transmitter, it reports 100%. But let's say 50% of your packets arrived at the receiver, but all of the acknowledgements came back, it would report 50%. On the other hand, suppose 100% of your data packets arrive at the receiver and it sends back all those acknowledgements, but they get blasted in the airwaves, and only half of those acknowledgements get back to the transmitter, it will report 50%, because it cannot know, because the data was missing, whether or not the other half got to the receiver or not. So it is actually possible for a receiver to still be getting 100%, but the transmitter reports 0 because all of the acknowledgements coming back, which are in the telemetry, a weaker signal, get knocked out of the air, and therefore the poor transmitter doesn't know what's happening, so it would report 0%. So yes, it's the Q value is the round trip, and therefore that's why, pardon me, it's quite possible to have a very low Q value but still be in control of the model. It can be because the weaker telemetry signal is getting knocked out. But obviously, it could be the other way around. It could be that the outgoing signal to the model is getting knocked out. So if you get a very low Q value, then yes, do something about it, because even if you're still under control and you're not having any problems, if you're getting a low Q value, you are getting close to the limits of it. So do something about it, like fly back closer to yourself.
Okay. I think one of the guys listening in said that the TX is a lot stronger. He implied 10 times stronger.
10 times more. That's Simon, whose job is electronics. He understands the system very well.
We've got another quite complicated question here from Peter Farnell. A friend has 2 RSAT into a central box in a glider and lost control temporarily for a few seconds before regaining control. His TX stated error E. Do you have any ideas what this meant? It did not have more alarms activated, so as far as I could tell. So error E. Do you know what error?
Error
Anything
E,
about error E?
Error E or alarm E.
It says error E.
It would depend what he's got. The alarms are in alphabetical order, so it would depend what alarm he's got set up on E.
Okay.
That's using the Morse code alarms,
Yeah,
which is
right, yeah.
very much old Jeti from the days when they had modules, not transmitters. So it would the receiver would send back a Morse code beeping for the module in the back of your AR Futaba, whatever, to beep out at you. If you've got a Jeti transmitter, you really should use the proper telemetry system and have the Morse code alarms switched off. If you're using the proper telemetry and data recording and voice alarms, etc., you'll be told in plain language what's happened. And certainly, if he was to take the data log from that flight and put it up on Jeti Studio, it will actually flag up probably with a little triangle where that alarm occurred, and you can have a look for what was going wrong there, what value had gone critical.
Okay. Thank you for that, Harry. Adrian Bassett asks, is it okay to not update the receiver if you're happy with the model, how the model's flying and all okay? I think you probably answered that already, Bernie, didn't you, by saying that you were flying some old receivers and you couldn't update them anyway, and you were still quite happy.
Recommendation would always be to update if possible.
Okay.
The problem you can run into with not updating a receiver is when you go into Device Explorer to go into that receiver, for instance, you want to do some remapping or set failsafes or whatever. And if the transmitter sees that it's an old version of receiver software, it'll put up a message on the screen to say, oh, this is an old version, you really ought to update. And you can ignore that and carry on. But there does come a point where receiver software can be so old that Device Explorer will just say, no, not letting you into it anymore. And so the receiver would still work to control servos, but you couldn't get into it anymore to update failsafe. But it will have to be a very old version of software to go that far with Device Explorer.
Okay. Rude again. He says, can I use KST servos with Hall effect on Jeti? Bernie, any?
Can you use KST servos
with Hall effect? So I think they've got Hall effect feedback rather than bots.
If the servos will work with other systems, they'll work with Jeti.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't see a problem with it. I don't know. I don't use KST servos.
Yeah, that's fair enough. They're still streaming in. Let's just go across here. There was a question about F5J aerial length.
Yes, you can use the 825s. It says Win has done KST. So yes, you can use them.
Okay. Yeah, I can't find that question. It was someone asked about shortening the aerials for tight F5J installations. What's the advice there, Bernie?
The official advice is no.
No.
You shouldn't alter the aerials at all. The aerials work. If you've got a brand new aerial and you measured the final bit of the uncovered, which is not uncovered on a Jeti, it's actually got yellow shrink tube on it. But
yeah.
If you measured that bit and you were capable of cutting down the outside part of the aerial and removing it and get exactly the same part, it will work all right. But it will not have been balanced in the factory. It will probably work all right. I've heard of people losing the end of the aerial, retrimming, and they've been fine. But
okay,
if Jeti replace an aerial, the receiver actually goes on a machine and is rebalanced for the new aerials.
Okay. I think we've just about got through all of those questions, or a few people in the questions actually said that they were getting great service from you, Bernie, which is nice to hear.
It is.
But
Thank
it
you.
didn't really, that was from Greg Butterworth, it didn't really sort of warrant a question as such, but nevertheless good to hear the service that you're providing. I think unless there's anything else anyone wants to say, we've probably about done the meeting. I would like to thank both you, Bernie and Harry, for a really, really professional presentation. That was top notch. I think you'll agree with that, Andy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, very good, very, very good. And
Yeah.
well done with the questions there, Barry, keeping them going as well.
Yeah, they were by far the most questions that we've had. Really, really pleased. This is the first time that we sort of gone commercial with the ITAT. It started off as being specialist interest groups, and we're kind of going in some different directions. And this is the first kind of overtly commercial that we've done. So yeah, really, really pleased with that. I think I'll take this opportunity. Next week, we've got Luke Goymore doing a presentation, completely different from this. It's about getting back into aero modeling. Luke's was flying when he was younger, and now he's got back into aero modeling. I've got a feeling it's going to be a pretty interesting talk. So great to see some of you along for that. Then the following week, we've got another cracking talk. We've got Rob McMyer from Holland. He's going to talk about his racing engine since 1979. The week after that, we've got Neil Tidy from Laser Engines, which will be another great talk. So there has been more questions coming. Let me just whiz through those and see if there's anything that
I see John Greenfield made a comment that he was surprised I managed to stay awake so long.
Yeah, that wasn't very charitable, was it?
No, but quite true. I'm well known for turning up for flying competitions and shows and being asleep on the flight line. It's the one time I get to be off.
Whilst you're looking through those, can I say that I get a lot of requests for programming help, which I'm quite happy to take. Simplest way to contact me is through the YouTube channel. If you put a comment on a video, I get notified of it. And a lot of my videos are actually a result of people sending me requests for how to do something. So if there's anything puzzling you, contact me there, or if you know me through Facebook, whatever, Messenger there, then I'm quite happy to take requests and try and help people with any specific programming errors or problems they have.
Brilliant. That's great. Okay.
I'll just reply to Graham Stanley and anybody else that wants to watch the session again. It was live streamed onto YouTube. In fact, it's still running.